Hello, I'm Phil Lipoff. Thanks so much for streaming with us. Russia launching a barrage of new attacks all across Ukraine and raining down missiles on that country's capital. Russian forces striking a high-rise apartment tower and another building in Kyiv. Radio Free Europe reports a journalist working for the U.S.-funded broadcaster was living in one of those buildings and has died. Her body was pulled from the rubble today. Video circulating online shows the moment a missile made impact in Kyiv, and then this. Dramatic surveillance footage capturing the explosions. The attacks coming as UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres was visiting Kyiv and met with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, as you see here. We've also learned an American Marine veteran, 22-year-old Willie Joseph Cancel, was killed fighting alongside Ukrainian forces. His wife says he went there to help people. She calls him a hero. The U.S. State Department tells us they are now monitoring this situation and warns Americans should not travel to Ukraine right now. Senior foreign correspondent Ian Pannell reports for us from Kyiv.
An American fighting alongside Ukrainian troops is amongst the casualties of the war. Willie Joseph Cancel's wife confirming his death to ABC News, saying, "My husband went there wanting to help people. He'd always felt that that was his main mission in life." Russia attacking Kyiv, launching missiles into the Ukrainian capital. These videos circulating online show the moment the missiles slammed into buildings. This is the random danger all Ukrainians must live with daily. This video was given to ABC by a resident whose apartment block was struck. The attack happening as the UN Secretary General was in the capital meeting President Zelensky to try and move the diplomatic process forward. Zelensky saying the Russian attack shows what little regard Moscow has for the United Nations. Adding that the attack requires an appropriate, powerful response. The strike comes as President Biden looks to target those closest to Putin, asking Congress to give him the authority to use the proceeds from seized assets of Russian oligarchs for Ukraine. Biden also calling on legislators to authorize an additional $33 billion in military aid for Ukraine over the next 5 months.
The cost of this fight is not cheap, but caving to aggression is going to be more costly if we allow it to happen.
As Russian forces push to take the Donbass, a senior U.S. defense official saying Russia's advance in the region has been slow and incremental. In Mariupol, Ukrainian fighters and civilians are trapped inside the city's Azovstal steel plant, surrounded by Russian forces desperate to escape. A far-right paramilitary group, now part of the Ukrainian National Guard, releasing this video, appearing to show the aftermath of an attack on a hospital inside the plant. ABC News has been unable to verify the video's authenticity. Back in the capital region, we went with a mine removal team, gathering unexploded ordnance from liberated villages, a job as critical as it is dangerous. More than 80,000 explosive devices have been found across Ukraine since the war began. You can see here there are grenades, there are shells, these are anti-tank mines. The team gathers the munitions in one place. A countdown commences. And then this, just some of the tens of thousands of unexploded bombs and rockets now littering Ukraine. Well, Phil, we're at the site of one of those missile strikes. Now, what the Russians say they hit is a rocket production factory. Now, there is a factory over there. We can't get a clear shot of it. There's some damage to the building, but one imagines if there had been rockets being produced there, it would have produced a much larger explosion. But it wasn't the only missile to land. There were also missiles that landed here. And here you can see the scale of the damage. This was clearly a residential apartment block. There were people living in there, leading regular lives, once again torn apart by Russia's war. Phil?
Unending destruction. Ian, thank you. Also, Trevor Reed, the American Marine veteran released in a prisoner swap with Russia, is back home after nearly 3 years in Russian prisons. Reed is finally freed after being exchanged for a Russian serving time here in the U.S. Stephanie Ramos has more on Reed's first hours back on U.S. soil and the other Americans still being held in Russia.
Former Marine Trevor Reed is recovering at a military hospital at Joint Base San Antonio in Texas. As we learn new details about his condition, the Reed family spokesman saying he is receiving care from a world-class Department of Defense team. Reed also being offered intensive psychological counseling and support after spending nearly 3 years imprisoned in Russia on charges he assaulted a police officer, an accusation he and the U.S. government insisted were false. Reed freed in a top-secret prisoner swap, seen in this video broadcast on Russian state TV. Congressman August Pfluger there to greet Trevor on the tarmac in Texas early Thursday morning, describing what he saw.
Did he seem excited? Did he seem anxious?
He was obviously very fatigued. His spirit is incredible. He's a survivor. He's a fighter. And there's obviously health concerns with him. And I think that's one of the reasons that President Biden was convinced that we needed to get him back now.
Senior Biden administration officials say discussions with the Russians intensified in recent weeks as Reed's health deteriorated, with fears he may have contracted tuberculosis. As Reed recovers, pressure now growing on President Biden to help free the other Americans still imprisoned in Russia. Paul Whelan, also a former Marine, has been in Russian custody since 2018. He denies charges that he was a spy. In a statement, Whelan asking, "Why was I left behind? Why hasn't more been done to secure my release?"
I would say that we will continue to do everything possible to bring Paul Whelan home. The president is focused on that.
WNBA star Brittany Griner also in Russian custody since February after she was accused of going through an airport near Moscow with hashish oil.
Reed has a long road to recovery. He'll receive medical care here in San Antonio at a military hospital that helps service members and civilians acclimate to life after being imprisoned overseas. Phil.
Stephanie Ramos, thank you. Oklahoma is now taking new steps to make abortion almost impossible for women there. Just weeks after the governor signed the most restrictive abortion law in the country, the state legislature now passing another bill based on that controversial Texas law. Congressional correspondent Rachel Scott has more. Rachel.
Hey, Phil, good morning. And I can tell you that I was just on the ground there in Oklahoma talking to Republican lawmakers who told me that they want abortion outlawed entirely, and they're willing to pass any measure that gets them closer to doing just that. And so overnight, we saw this bill clear the state legislature. It bans abortion as early as 6 weeks. That's before many women even know that they are pregnant. It's modeled after that strict abortion law in the state of Texas that empowers private citizens to sue anyone who helps a woman get an unlawful abortion, including the doctor who may perform one. That person could then collect a reward of at least $10,000 if successful. Now, Governor Kevin Stitt is expected to sign this bill into law in just a matter of days. He has already signed a bill that makes performing abortion illegal, but that is not expected to go into effect until August. And that's the key difference here. Once the governor signs this bill, it will go into effect immediately. Abortion providers say that they do plan to challenge this, but unless a federal judge puts this law on hold, abortions in the state of Oklahoma will all but stop. And of course, both sides of this issue are anticipating that Supreme Court decision in June that will decide the future of Roe versus Wade, Phil.
Yeah, all eyes on the Supreme Court for that. Rachel, thank you. Coming up, how the pandemic has dramatically changed the careers of women and in many cases upended their work-life balance. That's after the break. Welcome back. We are taking a closer look at how the pandemic has drastically changed women's careers and dramatically altered their work-life balance. From taking on childcare or family care to what is being dubbed the Great Resignation, many women are feeling overwhelmed and burned out. Ariel Reshef has more.
Raina Boston is a working mom with 3 children under 6. Her husband is a healthcare professional. So, like many women, when the pandemic hit in 2020, she says she knew she had to make a major career sacrifice.
So at the start of the pandemic, we had 2 kids, and my husband has no way of working from home. And so that means it fell to me to do a lot of the picking up.
Raina making the difficult decision to forfeit her new promotion in her HR job, instead taking a demotion, scaling back in order to put family first.
I just knew that I needed to be able to take a step back career-wise.
And she's far from alone. Between February 2020 and April 2020, over 3.6 million women exited the labor force, meaning they were no longer working or looking for work. There are still 872,000 fewer women in the labor force now than in February 2020. Some calling it the she-cession.
Many women had to rethink the role of career in their life, which honestly is sad because for many years now, we've been talking about making sure that we can achieve gender equity, that we can achieve pay equality. Insert a pandemic that basically pressed pause on so much of the progress we've made.
Tara J. Frank is an equity strategist and author of the book, The Waymakers.
Women were taking on a lot of the work at home. They also took on more of the homeschooling responsibilities.
And Tara says the impact even greater for some.
Women in senior roles, women who have children under 10, single mothers obviously have been really impacted by the pandemic, and Black women have been especially impacted by the pandemic.
There are 1.1 million fewer women in jobs since February 2020, but experts say there is hope. 431,000 jobs were added in March of 2022, women making up 62.9% of them. And with more companies now recruiting women and changing work culture, experts tell us women may have more leverage to negotiate and find a balance.
This is a wonderful moment for women to redefine the rules.
Raina says despite the challenges of the past 2 years, there have been silver linings too.
I am in much greater alignment with my values and what I actually want to be doing in my career, as opposed to just mindlessly climbing a career ladder.
So many people can relate to her, and Raina says that she feels lucky to have kept her job, even if she had to take a step back. She says she's now been promoted again, but this time on her own terms. Phil?
Ariel, thank you. We want to talk a little bit more about this. So joining me now is economist at Indeed Hiring Lab, Anne Elizabeth Conkle. And Elizabeth, thanks so much for taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so we just heard the story of Raina there, working mom in Ariel's report with 3 children under the age of 6. Tell us how the pandemic has affected moms like Raina, not just here, but really all across the globe.
So the pandemic was devastating for all workers, but particularly for women and especially mothers. Women bore a large portion of the job losses, particularly in the acute stage of the pandemic. Like Raina mentioned, when schools are closed and a spouse has a job that they have to go to in person and childcare facilities are closed, there's not a lot of give in other places, and so you have to make that choice. And the statistics point to this. Looking at the prime age women's unemployment rate, i.e. women in that age bracket of 25 to 54. In February of 2020, their unemployment rate was 3%. It shot to 13.7% just 2 months later in April. The good news is that a lot of the labor market statistics are showing that we have seen a robust recovery. Prime age women are returning to the labor force. For example, continuing with the prime age women's unemployment rate, it is now 3.1%. Over the last 2 years, we have seen devastating losses in the labor market, but fortunately, a very quick recovery for women. I will say that we are not back at where we were pre-pandemic, but we are getting closer and closer to it. Just a little bit more progress needed on that front.
And it's been particularly hard for women of color. Tell us why.
So for women of color, some are disproportionately represented in lower wage occupations. And we have the gender pay gap, unfortunately. That was persistent before the pandemic. It continues now. When we look at women overall in 2020, full-time working women earned 83 cents on the dollar compared to men. But there are substantial disparities for women of color. Black women earn 64 cents on the dollar compared to white men. For Hispanic women, even worse, 57 cents on the dollar compared to white men. And so the idea that we are returning to, that we just need to return to the labor market of February 2020 is not the complete answer. We want those headline statistics to return to some of those numbers, but we also need to fix a variety of things under the hood, such as the gender pay gap, and be cognizant of things like the long-term wealth effects of, maybe not getting that raise, getting that promotion. That has a cumulative effect, and we want women to be able to accumulate wealth just as much as men.
We heard a little bit of a bright side in Ariel's report, and you mentioned it as well. We can put the statistic up. There were 431,000 jobs added in March of 2022, and women make up 62.9% of them. So what do you think the next few years look like with women in the workforce, especially as the future of the pandemic for all of us really remains uncertain?
So the pandemic really highlighted that childcare is an issue. It was an issue before the pandemic, but it was one that wasn't getting a ton of focus. And the pandemic put that front and center. Some research I have done, doing some survey work at Indeed, found that childcare is a key factor why some unemployed women just simply aren't urgently job searching. 35% of prime-age women cited childcare as a reason, compared to just 18% of their male counterparts. And so I think that childcare and flexibility are going to be continue in the labor market discussion in the next few years, because the pandemic has shown us that those labor market inequalities have really shown a spotlight on them. And I'm hopeful that, hopefully we can make improvement on these issues as well.
I think we all like the word hopefully. And Elizabeth Conkle, thanks so much. Appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
All right, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to ABC News Live. Some breaking news right now coming in from Afghanistan. The Taliban Interior Ministry says at least 11 people have been killed. 20 more were injured in a large explosion at a mosque in Kabul, where hundreds of worshippers had gathered for prayers on the last Friday of Ramadan. No groups have claimed responsibility. The blast comes after the Taliban leader released a message calling for all Afghans to come together and banning the production of opium. This is obviously a breaking story. We're going to continue to gather updates and bring them to you as it develops. White House Communications Director Kate Bedingfield announced in a tweet that she's tested positive for COVID-19. She says she last saw the president Wednesday in a socially distanced meeting while wearing an N95 mask, and he is not considered a close contact as defined by the CDC. Now, you'll know this is just the latest positive case in the president's inner circle after Vice President Kamala Harris tested positive on Tuesday. Biden and Harris had not seen each other in more than a week and were not considered close contacts. The CDC has issued a nationwide alert now about a global hepatitis outbreak. This comes after more than 20 cases of hepatitis in children have been identified in at least 6 states. The death of a child in Wisconsin is suspected to have been caused by the illness as well. About 170 cases have been identified across the globe. Now to the dramatic defamation lawsuit in Hollywood. Actor Johnny Depp suing his former wife Amber Heard for $50 million over an op-ed she wrote calling herself a victim of domestic abuse. Heard countersuing Depp, accusing him of defamation as well. The trial has turned into something of a spectacle in which Depp has testified about everything from taking pills as a child to a near mental breakdown in which the actor said he used his severed finger to write on the walls of it in his own blood to recount his ex-wife's alleged lies. The divorced couple wrapped up 3 weeks, week 3, I should say, of the trial yesterday. So ABC News contributor and Law and Crime Network host Brian Buckmeyer joins me now to discuss all of this. Brian, as I said, as you were sitting down, this is just, I mean, the whole thing is kind of like a train wreck.
Yeah, in so many ways, because you know what's coming. You see the allegations, and we can kind of understand this is a toxic relationship, to say the least, but you can't stop but just watch because you want to see every captivating fact that comes in.
So Depp says, and I want to get this right, his movie career suffered after Heard wrote that 2018 op-ed piece that referred to She referred to herself as a public figure representing domestic abuse. Heard's attorneys say her opinion is protected. That opinion is protected by free speech. So it seems Depp is going to have to prove, he's going to have to prove that those domestic violence allegations are false. So what can we expect from his lawyers? What can we expect from her?
Yeah, so far we've kind of seen it. He was on the stand already, and he's testifying to the various types of abuse. First, he starts off with his own personal history, how his relationship with his mother, we saw a lot of abuse there. And then we also got to understand how he reacts to confrontation. We listened to audio recordings of when Amber Heard wants him to be close to her. She gets a little violent, and he's saying, hey, I got to separate myself. I've got to go away from you. And for some reason, she interprets that as abuse onto her. And so now we're starting to get a picture of how does Johnny Depp react to a toxic relationship? How does he react to abuse, starting from his mother? And then he transformed that into how it reacted to Amber Heard. And so now we're seeing that, as he puts it himself, he's the actual victim here, and Amber Heard is the one who's the aggressor.
This is all playing out so incredibly publicly. Heard has yet to testify. Do we expect her to do that? And if so, what kind of effect would it have?
Yeah, we're actually expecting her to testify early next week. Right now, it's Friday. They don't typically hold court on Friday. It's a Monday to Thursday type of situation. But early next week, we'd expect her to testify. From what we're understanding and hearing, she may be her lawyer's first witness on the stand. And she's going to have the counter effect to what Johnny Depp testified to. Yes, I'm hoping that she admits to some of it. If she doesn't, I think her credibility is going to be out the window. But I think this is going to be a he said, she said, where she's going to present the abuse that she felt occurred, both physical and emotional. And maybe we will also see some witnesses that she brings to the stand to try to corroborate that, because Johnny Depp has already kind of destroyed her credibility. And I think from a lot of our viewers we're seeing at Law and Crime and ABC, also her likability as well is kind of destroyed so far.
And so if she gets on the stand and talks about the abuse, then we have, you said it's he said, she said, then we have sort of like a mutual abuse case. How does that play out in the end?
So it's a number of things. So there are two courts that are playing out right here. There's the court in Virginia, and there's the court of public opinion.
Always is.
And I think with the court in Virginia, as much as Johnny Depp's fans may not like what I'm about to say, it's going to be an uphill battle. Because unlike in the UK, where a person would have to prove that they're telling the truth, here Johnny Depp has to prove that Amber Heard is telling a lie. Flat out, that's just difficult in of itself. But we have seen some of that in the lack of photos showing that Amber Heard is injured. The witnesses so far that have said, we've never seen an injury on Amber Heard, we've always seen it on Johnny Depp. But just because other people don't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So Amber Heard is definitely going to put forward probably some witnesses and pictures of her own to try to prove her case.
And then last question, and really the big one, what effect is this case going to have on their careers? Because, in defamation, it's, hey, you've hurt me in this way, and it's going to hurt my job. So how does this hurt both of them? Does it help either one of them?
Yeah. So I think, going into this, I thought this was a horrible trial. I thought that no one was going to win here. You're airing out the dirty laundry, and everyone's going to look poorly upon both Amber Heard and Johnny Depp. I seem to have been wrong.
Really?
Because as this case goes on, I'm seeing more and more love and affection towards Johnny Depp from his fans, who are very forward in terms of saying that he is the victim here. And there has been some strong evidence to that as well. I think he may come out of this much like Robert Downey Jr. came out of the 90s, where a lot of bad publicity was around him, and now we love him as the man who saved the Marvel Universe.
Yeah, you wonder if it's a popularity contest between fan bases when it should be about the case.
Exactly.
All right, Brian, thank you so much. I appreciate you being here. I'm Phil Lipoff. Thanks for streaming with us. Stay with ABC News Live for more news, context, and analysis.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.